The King Louis XIV Sorcerer's Son Part 2. Chapter 8. Adeline de Grailly. The invitation was for morning tea. But Versailles kept no real mornings, only curated sunrises behind lace-draped windows and wine-laced whispers. Julien entered the Queen's salon just before noon, greeted by the scent of rosewater, orange blossom, and polished deceit. The long gallery was filled with chatter, music, and a dozen women seated on embroidered cushions beneath ceilings painted with gods who watched and said nothing. At the center, Queen Marie-Thérèse, poised in a high-backed chair carved from white ivory and gold leaf. Julien bowed. "Your Majesty." "Ah," she said, voice cool. "The court's new Florentine mystery." "Versailles has many mysteries," Julien replied smoothly. "I merely study them." She smiled faintly. "Then study well, Comte. Some things here bite." He saw her before he heard her name. She moved quietly, almost apologetically, a girl in a sea of women who wielded beauty like blades. Her gown was pale lavender, simple by court standards. No diamonds. No furs. Just a silver locket at her throat and a book pressed against her chest. "Adeline de Grailly," murmured a nearby noblewoman. "The Marquis. Orphaned at 16. Ward of Baron de Mortain." Julien's eyes narrowed. Mortain. But she didn't move like the Baron's blood. She took a seat on the edge of the circle, offering a timid smile to the Queen. The Queen gave her nothing in return. "Too quiet," whispered another woman. "Too clever. Dangerous combination." Later, as guests moved toward the fountain courtyard for wine and honeyed fruit, Julien stood at the edge of the reflecting pool. Adeline appeared beside him, not speaking at first. She seemed content with silence. But after a moment she turned toward him. "You're the one the Queen is watching." Julien smiled sideways. "Then I must be very boring. Or very dangerous." He turned to face her. "And you? Are you dangerous, Marquis?" She looked away, toward the water. "I'm a girl who reads too much and smiles too little. That makes me suspicious here. Then we have that in common." As Julien offered her his arm to escort her back toward the court, a voice like frost cut through the courtyard. "Adeline." Baron de Mortain stood near the terrace steps, his shadow stretched too long in the sun. His gaze flicked to Julien, registering, weighing, filing away. "You were told not to linger." Adeline tensed. "I was simply walking, uncle. Now you are done." She curtsied politely to Julien, her eyes offering something her lips could not, a warning or a plea. Then she walked to the Baron's side. And he walked away with her without a word. Back in his private chamber, Julien stood before the mirror, watching as its surface flickered. He cast a minor invocation. Adeline's image appeared. She sat in a small library room, turning the pages of a worn novel. Alone. Isolated. Watching the door. Waiting for something. Or someone. Julien lowered his hand and ended the spell. "Adeline de Grailly," he whispered. "The Queen's pawn. The Baron's possession. And now, my weakness." Chapter 9. The Baron's Shadow. By the next morning, Adeline's name was on everyone's lips. Not scandalously. Not yet. But like a puzzle that no one had solved. The Baron's niece, yes. But the girl barely speaks. They say her dowry includes lands near Lyon. And yet she's never been promised. Curious, isn't it? Julien moved among the whispers like a ghost. He spoke when expected, laughed when required, and remembered every name and voice. And always, his gaze followed hers. She spoke little. Smiled rarely. But she watched. Listened. She remembered. "She's hiding something," Desrosiers said one afternoon. "Or hiding from something," Julien agreed. And he had a sickening idea what it might be. Julien returned to the royal archive that night, not to spy on enemies, but to investigate Adeline herself. The Grailly grimoire responded to her name when he whispered it. Reveal the buried pages. Illuminate the hidden blood. A new scroll unfurled beneath his hand. Deed of guardianship, Adeline de Grailly, heiress to the lands of Belval. Parents deceased, carriage accident, 1672. Title held in trust by Baron Victor de Mortaine. But the ink shifted beneath the enchantment. Beneath. Accident. A word bled through. Murder. And below that, another line appeared, written in trembling hand, unsigned. He didn't mean for her to survive. Julien's breath froze. The next evening, Julien found Adeline alone in the Queen's garden, seated beneath a marble statue of Artemis. Moonlight fell on her like water. She didn't flinch when he approached. I found something, he said softly. About Belval. About your parents. She turned slowly. So did I, she whispered. He knelt beside her, no pretense, no performance. You were meant to die that day, weren't you? Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. I don't remember the crash. But I remember waking in a cold room with the Baron staring at me. And smiling like I'd ruined everything. Why didn't you tell anyone? Who would believe me? She said. A girl raised by her guardian? A noblewoman with no title of her own. You have a title. On parchment. Not in power. She stood abruptly. You don't understand what this place is, Comte. Versailles isn't a court. It's a net. You don't climb here. You get tangled. You hang. And when you stop moving, they applaud. He grabbed her wrist gently. I'm not part of his net. Then be careful. Because he thinks you are. As if summoned by the very mention of him, Baron de Mortaine appeared at the garden's edge. He moved like a statue on a leash. Slow. Certain. Watching everything. Comte de Brillac, he said coolly. How fortunate that my niece finds such chivalrous company. Julien bowed, every muscle alert. My lord. We were only enjoying the Queen's garden. So I see. And how fortunate, too, that you enjoy quiet places. I find the Queen's private garden very useful, for overhearing unspoken truths. Adeline lowered her head. The Baron took her arm, not roughly, but with unmistakable ownership. Come, Adeline. It's nearly curfew. Julien stepped forward. A walk is no crime, Baron. Mortaine's smile was cold. Neither is asking too many questions. Until someone decides it is. Julien stood alone in the moonlight, fists clenched. His oath to the king still bound him to secrecy. But his oath to his mother, to justice, to himself. That demanded action. He whispered into the wind. You tried to kill her once. Try again. And I'll make you wish you died in that carriage instead. Chapter 10. The Garden of Lies. 2 days had passed since the confrontation with Baron de Mortaine. Julien had kept his distance, not by choice, but necessity. The Queen's attention was growing colder, sharper. And the Baron had been seen speaking with the royal astrologer, the Bishop of Rouen, and 2 guards loyal to no one but Coin. The conspiracy was still in motion. But so was something else. Late that evening, a folded note appeared beneath Julien's door. No wax seal. No signature. Only a scent of lavender on the parchment. At moonrise. The East Garden. Come alone. He recognized the script. Adeline. The garden was overgrown in places, wild jasmine weaving into the hedges. Moonlight turned the pathways silver, and the air was thick with the scent of roses just past bloom. Julien moved quietly, his senses alert. He found her standing near the statue of Persephone, her cloak drawn tight around her. She did not turn when he approached. Why here? he asked. Because no one listens to flowers, she whispered. Then she turned to him. Her eyes were rimmed with shadow. Her voice unsteady. He's going to kill me. Julien stepped closer. What happened? A letter, she said. It was addressed to me, but the seal had been broken and resealed. The wax was still warm. She pulled a folded note from her sleeve and handed it to him. The contents were meaningless, 3 lines of court gossip and a formal request to dine. But the paper was laced with a bitter scent. Julien ran his thumb along the edge. Poison, he said. Contact-based. Slow. Undetectable until it's too late. Adeline's hands shook. He meant for me to handle it. To touch it. Maybe to rub my eyes after eating. He's done it before, she added. Her voice broke. I just never wanted to believe it. She turned away, hiding her tears. But Julien reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You were right to suspect him. And you're not alone. She looked up at him, startled. Why are you helping me? He didn't answer immediately. He could have said, because it's the right thing to do. Or because I lost someone too. But the truth was deeper. Simpler. More dangerous. Because you matter to me. Her breath caught. The silence between them shifted, not awkward but electric. And in that fragile stillness, they stepped closer without thinking. Her hand reached for his. Fingers brushed. And for a brief, impossibly dangerous moment, she kissed him. Julien pulled away gently, breathless. This is a bad idea. So is breathing in Versailles, she whispered. He smiled, despite himself. Then placed a silver thread into her palm. Wear this on your wrist. It's charmed to flare if you're touched with intent to harm. Even I can undo that spell. Only you? You trust me that much? I trust you more than I trust myself, he said. And far more than anyone inside that palace. As they parted, heading toward opposite exits, Julien paused. A shape lingered beyond the hedges. Still. Watching. Then it moved, a flicker of cloak, the glint of a blade tucked into fabric. But when Julien pursued it, it vanished. Not into the night. Into the walls. The hidden passages. Back in his chamber, Julien opened his grimoire and traced a sigil of echo. In the mirror, the vision appeared. Baron de Mortain. Holding Adeline's opened letter. A bottle of powdered nightshade beside him. And the Queen's voice, drifting softly from the doorway. If she becomes a problem, do what you did to her parents. I always planned to, the Baron said. Eventually, Julien closed the mirror. And whispered to the silence. Not this time. Chapter 11 Duel in the Fog. The fog came in strangely. It rolled across the palace grounds just past midnight, thick and unnatural, drowning the torches with ghost-white breath. No one summoned it. No one expected it. But Julien recognized it immediately. It wasn't weather. It was a cover. He had received a note, again unsigned, again scented faintly with lavender. Meet me at the fountains. There's something you need to see. But this time, the handwriting was wrong. Slightly off. Too formal. It wasn't Adeline. It was bait. He went anyway. The fountain at the edge of the gardens gurgled softly beneath a stone nymph's frozen smile. Julien stepped into the mist, every nerve on fire, cloak drawn close, a blade at his side, not enchanted, but forged with old steel and spell-etched by his uncle. He waited. No sound. No movement. Just the feeling of being watched from 3 sides. The first blade came from behind. Julien turned just in time, parrying with steel, catching the attacker's wrist and twisting hard. The man grunted, masked, silent, fast. Trained. A second emerged from the fog and lunged. Julien dodged, slashing across the chest, shallow but punishing. Then the third dropped from the terrace above, dagger aimed for Julien's throat. He whispered a single word. Fractura. The air cracked like glass. The assassin hit the ground as if yanked by chains, his own bones snapping on impact. The fight turned brutal. Julien spun between strikes, blade flashing in and out of torchlight. He whispered fire into his hand, but kept it low, subtle, invisible to the guards above. He couldn't risk a sorcerer being seen. Not yet. But with every blow, he grew faster. Angrier. And more deadly. Blood misted on marble. Breath steamed in the cold. 2 attackers down. 1 remained, the leader. And Julien knew who it was. The last assassin removed his mask. Captain Séverac, a royal guard loyal to the Queen's private court. Comte de Brillac, he sneered. Or shall I say something else? I'm whatever you need me to be, Julien said coldly. Right now I'm your reckoning. The Queen says you're a mistake. The Queen has made many. They fought without restraint, blade to blade, heel to stone. Julien bled from the shoulder. Séverac from the thigh. But then, Julien spun low and whispered. Lux rupture. A flash of blinding violet light erupted from his palm. Séverac staggered. And Julien drove his blade into the man's side, not to kill, but to mark. Tell her you failed. Tell her I'm not my mother. I'm worse. As guards rushed toward the scene, Julien vanished into the fog, spell-woven cloak hiding his trail. He returned to his chambers with blood on his shirt and fire in his veins. The Queen had moved from whispers to weapons. And now? He would respond in kind. Before sunrise, he entered Louis XIV's room without announcement. The king sat half-dressed at the hearth, sipping wine. He looked up. Saw the blood. Tell me it's theirs. 3 dead, Julien said. 1 wounded. And? They were sent by her. The king didn't speak for a long time. Then he whispered. Then the war has begun. Chapter 12, The Baron's Game. At dawn, Versailles glittered with restored perfection. The blood had been scrubbed from the marble. The fog had burned off. The guards returned to their posts, stiff and blank-faced as ever. But the silence had changed. Whispers replaced it. There was a duel last night. Some say it was bandits. Others say the Queen's dogs were off the leash. Julien walked the halls in silence, ignoring the glances, the muttering. He had drawn blood. Now the Queen would answer. And she did. That afternoon, a public proclamation was read aloud in the Hall of Maps. As of this day, the estate of Belleval, once belonging to the late Marquis and Marquise de Crécy, is to be reassessed for irregularities in title and transfer. A formal investigation shall be led by Baron Victor de Mortaine on behalf of the Crown. Gasps. Murmurs. Applause, from the wrong courtiers. Adeline stood at the edge of the chamber, white-faced. Julien arrived just in time to see her stagger out into the corridor, a hand pressed against her chest like she'd been stabbed. He found her in the Queen's chapel, abandoned except for flickering candles and the echo of a broken sob. They're going to take it all, she whispered. Belleval was all I had left. It was my family's. My future. And now it'll belong to him. Julien stepped forward. It won't happen. How can you be sure? Because I know how he works. Because I'm not just some Florentine diplomat. He paused. Then stepped closer. And because I'm no longer hiding who I'm fighting for. She looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean I'm done pretending I'm not on your side. She took a step closer too. Then I'll stop pretending I'm not terrified. That night, Julien slipped into the hidden corridor behind the Queen's wing and listened through the enchanted wall. The voices were crisp and clear. "She's vulnerable now," said Mortain. "Then press harder," the Queen answered. "Strip her title. Cut her income. Isolate her. But not too fast," she added. "She's useful to him. I want him cornered before he becomes dangerous." Julien closed his eyes. They weren't just going after Adeline. They were using her to get to him. Back in his chamber, Julien summoned Captain de Rosier and 2 other loyal courtiers. They met in secret, in a storage room below the barracks. "Belval is being stripped under fabricated charges," Julien said. "The Baron has no right to oversee the estate," said de Rosier. "He's been accused of bribery 3 times. "Exactly. Which is why we're going to feed him evidence." The others looked up. "False evidence?" "No," Julien said. "Real evidence of his crimes." Over the next 2 days, Julien and de Rosier forged a trap within the court. They leaked a rumor that Adeline possessed a hidden journal belonging to her mother. The journal allegedly contained evidence that Mortain had orchestrated the carriage accident. They circulated whispers that the Queen herself may have read it once, and chosen silence. It was only a whisper. But in Versailles? Whispers ruined dynasties. Adeline met Julien in the garden once more, this time beside the sundial, where the moonlight cut sharp angles across the grass. "He's circling me like a hawk," she said. "But I've stopped looking down." Julien smiled, proud. "You're stronger than he ever expected." She stepped closer. "I don't need saving." "I know. But I want you beside me." His hand found hers. No magic. No fire. Just warmth. That night, Julien stood on the palace terrace overlooking the Queen's courtyard. From the window below, he saw Mortain pacing. Tense. Agitated. The bait had been taken. The Baron was afraid. And Julien whispered to the knight. Check. Chapter 13. The Poison Ring. It arrived on Adeline's dressing table just after breakfast. A ring, delicate, silver, inset with a single violet gemstone, and engraved with the de Grailly crest. No card. No seal. But the servants said it had come from Baron de Mortain's page. "His lordship says it was recovered from your family's vault," the page had said. "He thought it should return to you." Adeline stared at the ring. It was her mother's. She remembered it in fragments, a soft hand stroking her hair, a flash of light at the dinner table, the glint of that violet stone as her mother waved goodbye before the carriage left for its final ride. She lifted it with trembling fingers. The metal was cool. Too cool. At the same moment, Julien stood in the stables speaking to de Rosier when the sigil on his obsidian ring flashed blue. A warning. Adeline was in danger. He didn't wait. He ran. As he sprinted through the servant corridors, Julien muttered a spell beneath his breath. Oculus Veritas. His eyes burned for a moment, and then the world shifted. Every object shimmered with a faint magical residue. And he saw it, a thread of cursed energy weaving from the Queen's tower down into the guest wing. A thread that wrapped around Adeline's chamber. And around a silver ring. Julien burst into Adeline's room just as she raised the ring to slip it on. "No!" He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her wrist before the ring touched her skin. Adeline gasped. "Julien?" "What?" "Don't move," he growled. He held the ring up to the light. It shimmered. Beautiful. Harmless. Then he whispered another spell. Exanimare. The gemstone cracked. And from it leaked a thin wisp of black smoke, oily, unnatural, coiling like a dying snake. Adeline stumbled back in horror. "What is that?" "Poison," Julien said. Cursed. Enchanted to bond with your skin. What would it have done? It would have made your blood forget how to breathe. Adeline backed toward the wall. He sent it. Mortain. Yes. He used my mother's ring. She pressed both hands over her mouth. He's not trying to ruin me anymore. He's trying to end me. Julien moved to her side. You're not alone. You keep saying that, she snapped, voice cracking. But you're still hiding something. Why do you know these spells? How do you sense curses like this? She was shaking. Afraid of the ring, but more afraid of him now. Julien reached into his coat and pulled out his mother's grimoire. Because I was taught to see what others cannot. He opened the book. Flipped to a sigil page. Let her see the ancient spells. The seals of a lineage hidden from Versailles. My mother was hunted for her magic. They called her unnatural. Now they call me dangerous. Adeline stared at him. Eyes wide. You're a sorcerer. Yes. A pause. Then she asked the question that mattered most. Are you dangerous to me? Never, he said without hesitation. In the Queen's Tower, Baron de Mortain stood beside the window, staring down at the garden paths. He destroyed the ring. Of course he did, the Queen muttered. The boy sees everything. Then we must blind him. She turned toward the Baron. Or we strike at her again, and make sure he's too late next time. That night, Adeline did not return to her own chamber. She stayed in Julien's. Not as a lover, but as a protected soul, a woman hunted for her blood, and guarded by a man who no longer feared what Versailles might think. They sat in silence near the fire. No words. Only warmth. Only truth. And in that quiet, Julien whispered, They've made their move. Now it's our turn. Chapter 14, Web of Steel. At dawn, Julien met Desrosiers in the Royal Fencing Hall, a cavernous space lined with mirrors, wooden practice dummies, and racks of ceremonial blades. But today, they weren't practicing forms. They were drawing a battle map of names and faces. Spread across a long oak table were royal invitations, seating charts from recent banquets, letters with the Queen's ciphered seals, and most importantly, a list of bribes Mortain had paid in the last 2 years. We strike the legs before the head, Desrosiers muttered. We break the Baron's influence piece by piece. Julien nodded. Start with the money. Then the mouths. Then the knives. Their first target was Etienne Moreau, a discreet financier who had helped Mortain launder funds through the bishop's land holdings. Julien used no magic here, only political leverage and a threat of exposure. We have letters, Julien told Moreau privately. Signed by your hand, smuggled through your clerk. If you speak now, you walk away clean. Moreau, pale and sweating, broke in minutes. The Baron gave me the funds to buy silence. By whose silence? The coroner. The one who signed Adeline's parents' death report. Desrosiers approached Bishop Armand of Rouen, who had long lent Mortain quiet support in exchange for land rights and favors. The Queen is weakening, Desrosiers whispered at a mass. And your name appears in the Black Ledger. Armand flinched. If she falls and your name falls with her, your head will follow. 3 days later, Armand publicly renounced any connection to Mortain's faction during a chapel mass, causing a ripple through the court so deep, the Queen's hands trembled as she poured her tea. The Baron's losing friends, whispered courtiers. And the Comte de Brillac seems to know too much. Perhaps too much for his own safety. Julien's name was now spoken in fear. Not for what he'd done, but for what he might do next. Adeline was not idle. With Julien's help, she began restoring her parents' name, recovering correspondence, meeting with old allies, and stepping, cautiously, back into the social light. At a salon hosted by the Duchess of La Meilleraye, she recited a poem her mother once wrote, and her voice did not shake. Julien watched from across the room. "She doesn't need saving," he murmured. "She needs room to grow." That night, the Queen met with Mortain in her private salon. Her voice was quiet, but furious. "He's bleeding us." "Not with blades, but with proof." "Then we poison the well," Mortain said. "How?" "We turn the court against him. We paint him as a spy. Or better yet," he smiled, "as a sorcerer." The next morning, rumors slithered through the marble halls. "The Comte de Brillac has a library of forbidden texts. He speaks to himself in dead languages. The Queen suspects he's not who he claims." And one whispered by a page into a noblewoman's ear, "He speaks his lover's name into fire." Back in his chamber, Julien stared into the fire as the rumors reached him. Desrosiers paced nearby. "They're going to come for you with trials and torches." Julien looked up. "Then we burn brighter than they ever imagined." He opened his mother's grimoire, turned to the page marked "Truth against Shadow," and whispered, "Let them come." Chapter 15: A Secret Within the Tombs. It began with a passage in a letter recovered from Mortain's private steward. "She lies not in consecrated ground, but beneath the lion's tongue, where prayers rot in silence." Julien recognized the phrasing immediately. Charlotte de Grailly was not buried at Saint Denis as the court had claimed. She had been hidden, disgraced, erased. Julien found the reference in a floor plan of the original Versailles chapel, before it was expanded into the king's private theatre. The lion's tongue was a grotesque carving above a sealed door beneath the apse. No one had opened it in over 2 decades. Tonight he would. The crypt door opened with a soft groan of ancient metal and layered enchantment. Julien muttered a dispelling charm under his breath as the air grew colder with each step. His gloved fingers touched the wall, carved with names long lost. He descended into blackness lit only by a single floating orb of white flame summoned from his palm. The silence pressed in. Not holy silence. This was abandonment. At the far end of the vault, beyond rusted relics and fractured tombs, sat a sarcophagus of dark stone. No name. No crest. Only a single engraving. Chivu was unmade. Julien's breath caught. He knelt and touched the stone. Cold. Dry. And then, beneath his hand, a pulse. Faint. Not life, but memory. He opened his mother's grimoire. It glowed without instruction. And from the page, a voice whispered, "Julien!" He closed his eyes. "I'm here, mother." As his fingers rested on the stone, the chamber blurred. A memory shimmered into shape, a magical echo burned into the crypt's walls. He saw her. Charlotte. Tall. Proud. Bound in chains before the Queen. "You dishonor the crown," Marie-Thérèse had said. "No," Charlotte whispered. "I honor truth." "Then you will die nameless," the Queen hissed. Charlotte had not screamed. She had stared at the Queen with fire in her eyes. "You think you've killed my blood, but you've only planted it." The memory vanished. The crypt returned. Julien was on his knees, breath trembling. "You didn't die nameless. You made me." Beneath the sarcophagus, concealed behind a false floor stone, Julien found a hidden case wrapped in waxed leather. Inside, a stack of letters between Charlotte and the king. A final page signed in Louis XIV's hand. "I acknowledge our son, Julien de Grailly. Let him inherit what I could not protect." And a single royal seal, untouched by time. "This is it," Julien whispered. The proof. The Queen hadn't just covered up a murder. She had buried royal blood. And now the truth had risen. Hours later, Julien stood before the king in the study. The seal lay between them on the desk. "I found her," Louis stared at it for a long time. I failed her, he whispered. We both did, Julien replied. But now we don't have to fail France. The king stood. This ends. The queen. The baron. The silence. We will strip them bare. But not with war. He looked at Julien. With truth. In her chamber, the queen threw a goblet of wine against the mirror as Mortain read her the report. He found the crypt. He has the seal. Her reflection stared back, cracked down the middle. Then kill him, she whispered. Kill him before he stands in court.
Across every empire, every forgotten age, stories still whisper. If this tale stirred your spirit, leave a like to honor the echoes of the past. Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice weaves a new legend into the sands of time. And subscribe to our YouTube channel Historical Fantasy Stories, where myths walk beside history, and every discovery changes the world. The next forgotten legend is waiting to be found.